Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition, and we turn now to maybe one of Emily's most important poems, 341. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. Now, there's just so much to be said about this text. Guys, Emily is amazing because she covers the full spectrum of emotions, all the way from the horrors of anguish and pain to the jubilant joy that is going to be a huge part of the poet's life as well. She is able to encompass both. I think often people have selected a small number of poems from one or the other representative and kind of claim that that's what Emily is, the Gothic Emily or whatever, because they've read all these all these poems like this one about pain and anguish and suffering. I like to place a poem like this, though, within that context of another theodicy. That is to say, why must there be pain and suffering in the world? But there's clearly in this poem no cause, clearly, of what caused the pain. Could have been the death of a pal, could have been rejection of some kind. It isn't clear. When this poem was published in the Atlantic Monthly of February of 1929, I think already there were people who probably looked at it as one of Emily's more important poems. But to be fair, and our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily playlist. And if you have, then I'm hopeful that you've already studied our set of introductory comments where we talk about our big five. What does this poem say about epistemology, what you can know? We're going to hear something about that. Ontology and who we are, you're going to hear quite a bit about that. Psychology, the study of the individual mind. Sociology, the study of the collective mind. But it's that fifth thing, theodicy, that question of, as Milton outlines it, to justify the ways of God to men is the way he says it in Paradise Lost. Why must there be pain? Why must there be suffering here? I'm also hopeful that you've read through our preceding 340 poems. We just finished with 340, Is Bliss Then Such Abyss? If you have, then you'll maybe remember 241. I like a look of agony because I know it's true. Men do not sham convulsion nor simulate a throe. The eyes glaze once, and that is death impossible to feign. The beads upon the forehead by homely anguish stung. Or do you remember 280? When we read this one, I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading, till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating, till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I and silence some strange race wrecked solitary here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. Now, some have called, one scholar has called Emily an atomist of pain. She'll mention pain, the word, 50 poems. Other words we've mentioned already: agony, despair, grief, hurt, suffering, obviously, right? And this is that question of the formal feeling, the numbness. We just heard that in 280. Numbness, or this non-feeling. And the word choices here will be significant. Pay attention to them. Wooden, corpse, lead, for example. There is some who argue that Emily is verging on spiritual death. In poem 1046, she'll say, I've dropped my brain, my soul is numb. Some have said this is Emily's speaking about going mad. I like what Charles Anderson has had to say about this poem. This is the way that Anderson says it. He considers this work, quote, her most remarkable poem, rendering the extinction of consciousness by pain. And he also suggests that the three stanzas faintly shadow forth three stages of a familiar ceremony: the formal service, the tread of pallbearers, and then, of course, the final lowering into a grave. I think it makes some sense for us when we're looking at this poem to try to see that tripartite breakdown. This is a brilliant poem. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore, and yesterday or centuries before? The feet mechanical go round, of ground or air or aught, a wooden way, regardless grown, a quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead. Remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. You guys remember when we did Frost's classic Out Out that we play a very similar game of the way in which the body's life leaves. We've given full lectures on that poem at learnstrong.net if you want to run it to ground. Notice the key word of this poem is the first word of this poem, after. In other words, there is an assumption that whatever the anguish, the pain is, somehow we got beyond it. We got through it. That is to say, you can only remember the pain if you outlive the pain. In other words, it is Dante's Inferno. We're back to it again. You don't go to hell, Dante argues in his Theodicy, but rather you go through it. In other words, when pain happens, we mustn't ask, why did this happen to me, as much as we would ask, why did this happen for me? But you've got to get through the pain for that to happen, after great pain. A formal feeling comes, is this idea of numbness, the non-feeling. 241 again comes back to mind here, that formal feeling. In other words, after you go through the emotional experience, there's a certain kind of formal understanding of what happened. The nerves sit ceremonious. By the way, nerves takes us back to 292. Sit ceremonious like tombs. Here it's like tombs, later it'll be like a stone. The stiff heart, right, notice capitalized heart, questions. Was it he that bore, and yesterday or centuries before? In other words, there's a certain challenge to this pain. By the way, we're going to come to this pain in 344. 'Twas the old road through pain, right? And so the question is, pain and getting through it, it's almost like it's timeless. You're not clear exactly when it happened. Was it yesterday? Was it centuries before? In the end, it probably doesn't matter. Then we come back to the feet, and you'll remember at poem 340, we were dealing with the foot in the boot. The feet, mechanical go round. In other words, you're numb, you're in a stupor. We think of Emily, for example, going through her household duties throughout the day, baking her bread and the like, right? Mechanically just going through the actions of ground or air or aught. Notice your trinity there. A wooden way, regardless grown. A quartz contentment. When we hit poem 1510, it'll be a little stone. Quartz contentment. It's an amazing phrase. Quartz contentment, and then she'll say it, like a stone. In other words, there's something about going through terrific pain or anguish, she says, that turns us almost stone-like, quartz-like, right? This, she says finally, and this is the end of the first part of the poem, is the hour of lead. You'll remember that, that phrase in poem 280, boots of lead. This is the hour of lead, heavy. Then the second part of the poem is just that brilliant one line. Remembered if outlived. You got to join after and remember together. If is the key word here. Outlived, right? In other words, you only can think about what gifts there are to your pain or your suffering if you can get through the pain or the suffering. And then she'll finish with this interesting simile. It's as if freezing persons recollect the snow. In other words, there was this experience that you go through where you almost freeze to death. First, there's the chill. Then there's the stupor. That's that numbness. That's that formal feeling. Then there is the letting go. Now, when we get to poem 745, we'll play around. We'll play around again with this idea. It runs like this. Renunciation is a piercing virtue, the letting go, a presence for an expectation, not now, the putting out of eyes, just sunrise, last day, day's great progenitor, out thy. Renunciation is the choosing against itself to justify unto itself, when larger function make that appear, smaller that covered vision here. So much of Emily's stuff is about, as we have said, from her study of Plato, perspicacity, insight. What is it that you could do with the pain and with the suffering? Well, I think at 2a, her argument here is that pain, and anguish is the worst imaginable thing to go through. And yet, if you get through on the other side, the only way is the letting go. At 2b, well, again, the word choices here are remarkable. And of course, wooden corpse, lead, that kind of thing. And of course, the three parts of the poem that work rather nicely as well. At 3a, I mentioned Frost's Out, Out. Wallace Stevens, the snowman, has often come to mind. Some have even said it's possible that he was inspired to write that poem by virtue of the study of this poem. We're going to read a number of poems, though, that will speak directly to the very same challenges that will be resurrected here. 396 will sound like this. Again, we're not going to talk about these now. We'll just enjoy them. There is a languor of the life more imminent than pain. 'Tis pain's successor when the soul has suffered all it can. A drowsiness diffuses, a dimness like a fog envelopes consciousness as mists obliterate a crag. The surgeon does not blanch at pain. His habit is severe, but tell him that it ceased to feel the creature lying there. And he will tell you skill is late, a mightier than he has ministered before him. There's no vitality. Or when we get to poem 599, we'll enjoy it this way. There is a pain so utter, it swallows substance up, then covers the abyss with trance. So memory can step around, across, upon it, as one within a swoon goes safely where an open eye would drop him, bone by bone. Or when we get to poem 618, we'll come back to this poem when we do 618. At leisure is the soul that gets the staggering blow, the width of life before it spreads without a thing to do. It begs you, give it work, but just the placing pens or humblest patchwork children do to help its vacant hands. When we meet poem 443, we'll play around with it this way. I tie my hat, I cease my shawl, life's little duties do precisely as the very least were infinite to me. I put new blossoms in the glass and throw the old away. I push a petal from my gown that anchored there. I weigh the time 'twill be till 6 o'clock. I have so much to do, and yet existence some way back stopped, struck my ticking through. We cannot put ourselves away as a completed man or woman. When the errand's done, we came to flesh upon. There may be miles on miles of naught, of action, sick or far. To simulate is stinging work, to cover what we are, from science and from surgery to telescopic eyes, to bear on us unshaded, for their sake, not for ours. 'Twould start them we could tremble. But since we got a bomb and held it in our bosom, nay, hold it, it is calm. Therefore, we do life's labor, through life's reward be done, with scrupulous exactness to hold our senses on. We're going to enjoy that study. How about poem 650? When we get there, that one will read like this for us. Pain has an element of blank. It cannot recollect when it begun, or if there were a time when it was not. It has no future but itself. It's infinite to contain. It's past enlightened to perceive new periods of pain. And finally, when we get to poem 761, and guys, I'm only selecting just a handful of these poems that we could have read. She says it this way. From blank to blank, a threadless way, I pushed mechanic feet to stop or perish or advance, alike indifferent. If end I gained, if ends beyond, indefinite disclosed, I shut my eyes and groped as well. 'Twas lighter to be blind. Finally, to own a poem like this, what was a time when you had to live through and beyond great pain, and the only way you got there was a letting go? Thank you.